guys, welcome back, and today we're here with the final episode of my Spider-Man, or Journey to Spider-Man Far From Home series, and today I'm going to be talking about Spider-Man Homecoming. This is the first installment in the Tom Holland series of Spider-Man films, and at its release, I think I called it my favorite MCU film, and it was one of, if not my favorite Spider-Man film at the time. So how does it hold up? 2 years later, almost 2 years later, um, pretty dang well, if I may say so myself. There's some things that I could pick apart about it, and they're mainly little things that, if you think about them, they kind of fall apart. But they're just very small things. The whole cast in this movie is fantastic. I love all the actors in this film. Tom Holland, of course, is a fantastic actor. One of my favorite actors, if not my favorite. Bringing back some classic characters that we hadn't seen for a while, like Happy Hogan, and all these characters. Now, in case you're wondering, before I get into like a full-fledged review of it, there will be spoilers in this video, of course. And I am filming this on the evening of July 1st, 2019, so I just wanted to say to all of my fellow Ontarians or Canadians out there, Happy Canada Day. This will definitely be going up on July 2nd, though. But to those of you who are watching it, I'm filming this on the 1st of July, so Happy Canada Day to all my fellow Ontarians. And then also, I won't be seeing Spider-Man Far From Home until most likely the weekend, so please stray away from spoilers until, like, I'd say the end of the weekend on my channel, please, or your comments will be deleted, because I don't want anyone else to get spoiled in the film as well as if I get spoiled. Like, if I get spoiled, fine, whatever, but I don't want anyone else to get spoiled. But anyway, I'm just going to be talking about the movie now. I just love everyone in this movie. I love Michael Keaton. Michael Keaton's so great as the Vulture in this movie. He's one of, if not my favorite MCU villain. I think Killmonger is still my favorite. I don't know, but he's just so great. Like, he's really funny, but at the same time, he's just very intimidating. And he's just a very well-written character, honestly. If I may say so myself. Yeah, sorry guys, I'm just, finding my notes here, because I did write down some notes, for this movie. And I guess, like, so I've talked about the characters and stuff. I just think it's a very fun watch. Like, a lot of the MCU movies, some of them can be quite depressing at times, like Captain America the Winter Soldier. I was gonna put that on, like, 2 weeks ago, and then I just had to really consider it, because that's a very sad, depressing, dark movie, and I have to think twice before I put it on, but, like, with this movie, it's just a very unassuming, fun watch. I think that goes for some of the MCU movies, like Ant-Man and the Wasp, this one. You know, they're just very easy to put on movies that I think anyone can enjoy. And this movie really does work on its own as, like, a standalone MCU movie, because this movie uses the MCU as a more interesting backbone than other movies, where some of them just really lean into it. And this movie has an interesting thing where, you know, it acknowledges the existence of the MCU because it takes place in it, but it doesn't really overtake the whole thing. Like, Avengers Endgame was very much a movie that is, like, MCU-centric. Like, that is, like, this is the MCU, we're gonna go back on the journey, all that jazz. But with Spider-Man Homecoming, it kind of uses the MCU as a backbone for its characters, because it's very important to the main development of the Vulture, because the Battle of New York is basically a very key central element to his motivation, as that he is cleaning up the damage and, like, tech from the Battle of New York. So if that hadn't happened, which is a main event in the MCU timeline, then the Vulture would have come about. But at the same time, you know, it doesn't really lean into that, because, like, if you've seen the Avengers, then that's great. But if you hadn't, then it won't really matter to you. Like, it's not a big deal in the film. It's not like a big deal. Like, oh man, this is something you really need to know. No, it's not really a big deal. So if you haven't seen all, I think this movie works on its own. Once again, I think it works on its own without a lot of other, like, having seen a lot of other MCU movies. Tony Stark doesn't overtake the movie at all. There are a lot of, especially at the end, there's some great elements for Tony Stark fans, like Pepper showing up. Um, but yeah, it's just it uses the MCU, let's say, in a more interesting light and in a more interesting like way than other MCU films. In a way where it acknowledges its existence and uses kind of events that happen in it, that transpire in it, wouldn't work without the rest of the MCU, but it doesn't really take away from the experience, if you know what I mean. So I think it's a very interesting take on the whole universe from this high school's perspective. Then another element that I really love is the high school feels real, which is something that about the Tobey Maguire films was, I'm not saying you know all the characters by name, but all the characters feel distinct. You got Ned, you got MJ, even the smaller characters like Betty Brant, and like the whole, like, basically the whole decathlon team, the teacher, all of them feel distinct, and you'll remember them after the film. And it's just really great to have this sort of movie where you have all these characters, but they all feel distinct. You're gonna remember them. Like when Ned is like, "Hey, what are you doing?" and they're like, "I don't know, chess." Like there's all these little quirky characters that you'll remember after you see the movie, which I really appreciate. And the high school feels real, unlike the Tobey Maguire films where I felt like, and the Andrew Garfield ones, where they once again they all feel like adults. Like, they don't feel like uh, kids, But like with this film, they all feel like kids. Like there's like this kid flying a drone in the hallways, and it hits the teacher, and the teacher's like, "In my office now." Like there's a lot of great stuff like that feels real, I guess, to today's high school. So maybe it's not the same as back then for schools from like 2002, but for today's like standards, which is where I can relate to more, in that degree, um, I think that it's a better modern Spider-Man, I guess. So the high school feels like a real high school, and not like a bunch of um, like adults running around in school hallways. Um, the movie's also really nicely shot. Like there's a lot of nice shots in it, like when Peter's sitting and he's talking to Happy, and it's like a little comedic scene where he's leaving the message for Happy, and he tells him about the lady with the churro, and it's all just kind of like they shoot it with like this really nice sunset. And they shoot with a really nice lighting as well when Tony is giving Peter the pep talk on the roof. There's a lot of nice scenes like that where they take time and pick a really nice time and location to shoot these scenes. They have a really nice look to them, and they're really nicely shot, which is, another thing that I love about the film, which is, they take time, they take care, and that's especially apparent in the car scene, which I'll talk about in a minute. Then also the Stark suit, which the main criticism I see thrown at the movie is the Stark tech suit. I actually really enjoy the addition of the Stark tech suit because it ties into the main message of the movie and the main idea of all of it. Then also it adds a lot of great comedic value, and it's an interesting take on like what if Spider-Man, because I don't think that Spider-Man was really like Tony Stark's kind of little guy, or like his sort of apprentice sort of character in the comic books. I think that it was something the MCU really leaned into. So I think it really works as an idea to introduce into this universe. What if Spider-Man had an Iron Man type suit? But I don't think it's leans too much into the gadgetry. I think it lends to a lot of great comedic moments, and Karen is a great voice. What happened to Karen, by the way? I really hope she shows back up in Spider-Man Far From Home. Because she wasn't in Infinity War. I was hoping to hear her in Infinity War, and she's not in Endgame, and she doesn't show up anymore. So I really hope that they bring Karen back in Far From Home, because past the ferry scene, you never hear her again. But yeah, she's great, and she's actually Paul Bettany's wife in real life. The voice of Karen, that is. Now we're gonna talk about the weakest point that everyone points out is the Liz romance. Now, it's not really a romance, it's just Peter likes MJ, like Peter has a crush on her, and then they both kind of like each other, and it's very apparent that they both like each other, and it's quite obvious, and it's laid out pretty obviously throughout the film. And this is where I'm going to address some points in my first review of Spider-Man from 2002, which is, I think that for what they're going for, where I realize now that the people in the Spider-Man 1 movie, the 2002 movie, are supposed to be older than the kids in Spider-Man Homecoming. But I think for this film, it kind of works for what they're trying to go for, but I never really felt the chemistry between those two characters, Liz and Peter. I think that the MJ Peter, which is much more of a romance than just kind of a crush thing, I think that works for what they're trying to go for in that film's tone. here I think it works for a lot of it, but then at the end she just moves away, and it kind of ruins the whole main conflict of the movie and that whole aspect of the movie for me. So she's kind of pointless in the end. Like the actress is fine, um, but I think I enjoy Emma Stone more as Gwen Stacy, and I think even Kirsten Dunst more as MJ. And I'm just really looking forward to seeing the new MJ, Michelle, the Zendaya character, really take a lot of shine in Spider-Man: Far From Home, because Tom Holland and Zendaya have great chemistry in real life, and I saw that little clip of them in like the opera or whatever in that one clip that is on YouTube, and they have great chemistry. So I'm just really looking forward to that, and I think it'll be much better than the Liz Peter romance. But it's just kind of weird because like whatever Ned's like, oh, Liz has a crush on you, but it's like no, she has a crush on the Spider-Man version of you, and they do kind of comment on that, like, oh, what if she just means the version of you, whatever. But then like she's kind of mean about it. Like she's like, oh, we have a party tonight. Not that Peter would show up anyway, so she's kind of mean about it. I don't know, it's just very weird to me. That whole romance, it works, I guess, in the end, but, it doesn't really take away from the film at all for me. Um, the film also has a very interesting argument, which is, that I think a lot of other superhero movies don't touch on, but this movie does because it works on a smaller scale than other films, which is, hey, the rich guys, they live up in Stark Tower or whatever, and they don't realize that they take away the jobs from the little guys, and, the little guys like us, we've got to look out for each other, and we gotta pick up after them, we gotta eat their table scraps, that whole thing, that whole speech by Vulture, and I think that's a very interesting point in the movie. The movie tries to make. I think that's a very interesting argument, and I think it's true. I think it's a very interesting take on it. Now I'm going to talk about that scene where Vulture kills Shocker. It's kind of an odd scene. I know a lot of people don't like it because it feels like it kind of turns into a joke, or Vulture doesn't show a lot of remorse for it. I don't think it's meant to be a joke, really. It's just a very odd scene to me. Like, I understand the point of it. He says, okay, I'm going to tell your family about where you actually get your money from. And he's like, I can't afford you on the streets. And then he shoots him, and then he's like, I thought it was the anti-gravity gun. But so, you thought it was the anti-gravity gun, so are you making a joke that you actually thought it was the anti-gravity gun, and you made a mistake? And if you truly did make a mistake, then you should be showing remorse, but at the same time, are you just making a joke? It's really unclear in that scene, and it's never really been explained. I don't really understand that. So I will say, I don't necessarily hate that scene, but I'll definitely say it's odd. Okay, then we have this really odd scene. I'm going to be kind of delving into scenes more about odd things about the movie. There's this really odd scene where, Shocker and Tinker break into the school, and they're in the basement, and Peter tracks them down, and they're looking for the Chitauri energy core, and then they hear a noise, and then the Shocker turns around and, like, cocks his gun or his thing or whatever, and I'm like, okay, so you are breaking into, he's like, oh man, what if someone found out we were here? And then he knows what Vulture can do to him if he messes up, because he killed the other Shocker. But, so, why would he, so he's like, oh, we don't want to get caught, but then he cocks his gun as if he's gonna shoot someone, like a kid in a high school. Like, you're not allowed to do that, Like, I know America has pretty bad gun laws, but, like, you're not gonna shoot a kid. Like, that's really gonna get you on someone's radar, Like, that's, like, what's your plan there? Because, like, he cocks his gun or something. I don't know, I think that's really dumb. And then Peter just shoots a tracking device, and they try to say he doesn't know how to use all the gadgets, but it's like, we've never seen a tracking device before. And he just suddenly knows how to use a tracking device. Which does feel quite weird to me, because it's like, okay, so he just knows how to use a tracking device, well, we've never seen it before. And it's a very integral part of the plot from that point on. So I don't know, it's just something weird. It doesn't really take away from the movie for me, though. What else do I have written down? Interesting, I think I have a few more notes. The car scene. Now let's talk about the car scene. Now this is where I think the movie, people don't really give it enough credit for the fact that the people really do put in an effort, and I point out a few, like, really nice sunset shots and that sort of thing. But I will say, the scene in the car is fantastic. Like, they cut into, like, they really lean into the cinematography angle, And I think someone did like one marvelous scene. All the big YouTubers doing the one marvelous scene thing. I think someone did a video on that a while ago, like actually examining that scene. So go check it out. But I could talk about that scene all day. But so it kind of shows slowly Vulture piecing it together, and like it's like Peter knows who Vulture is, but Vulture doesn't know who he is, and neither does Liz. So they don't want to ruin it for Liz, who's in the car. And so Liz is kind of unintentionally giving away information to the Vulture, to her father, and he's kind of piecing together in his own mind through the information that Peter's Spider-Man. And so they get up to this red light, and then it zooms into him in the mirror, and then he says like, "Oh, it was horrible what happened in D.C." And then Peter's like, "Oh, I just saw it off from the ground." And then he just kind of like and then that's when he pieces it together and he says, "Good old Spider-Man." And then the light turns green, and then he just kind of gets distracted, and then Liz is like, "Oh, Dad, drive." So that scene is the way it cuts to like a shot of his face in the mirror, and then you see the reflection, and then you see the green light go on, and the green light is kind of signaling, to us that he knows. It's so well directed. It's such an incredibly directed scene. I could gush about it all day long, but it's so well done. I'm not even really into like cinematography and all that jazz, but that scene, I just have to talk about it. So then we're gonna talk about another thing, which is I guess a few more nitpicks about the movie. There's a really weird case of people getting places really quickly, okay, so the first example is Peter on the ferry, and he's with then he gets a call from Tony, and Tony's like, "Hey, I'm complimenting you," or whatever, and then he has to cut off the call, and then a second later the FBI shows up on this moving ferry. So this ferry is already gone off the dock, it's moving across the ocean, and then later on Tony says, "Who do you think called the FBI?" So Tony called in the FBI, who somehow made it onto, there's no helicopters or anything. How did you get onto a moving ferry? And then they attack Vulture or Peter or whatever with nothing but guns, and Tony should know that they have alien tech from, like, I guess the description that Peter has. But they just get there onto a moving ferry within, like, 2 minutes. That's very unrealistic. Like, Tony should have filled in more information to them about what they were facing off against. Or maybe he didn't really know. I just think that's really stupid. That was really weird to me, rewatching it. And then also, the Shocker just gets, it's something that I think I would call movie logic, but they just show up to places so quickly. Like, okay, Shocker, Vulture says, "I'll give you one more chance," and then Peter goes in, and they kind of try to visualize it as if Peter is seeing it really slowly, and then he walks in, and then he gets out, and then Shocker shows up, and then he's like, why did he send you here? And he says, "I guess you'll never know." But then he gets taken out by Ned. But it's like, how did you get there, though? So Vulture predicted that Peter, I get that, okay, Vulture predicted that Peter would leave, and then he sent Vulture, but, like, it's been, like, 2 minutes movie time, by the time he gets there, and I think it's been pretty quick in the movie itself. So, he didn't know before the car ride, so Vulture, like, I guess maybe immediately after he left, called Shocker, and got him over there, but, like Shocker wasn't nearby, was he? He just showed up, like, drove across the city or something? I don't know, that seems so unrealistic. And then another thing is it's not really a bad thing, but a pattern the movie has is characters kind of figure out the plot as it's going. Like, Peter's just chilling in this bunker. Yeah, he's just, like, chilling in the damage control deep storage vault. And then he's like, "Oh my god, it's been 37 minutes. And then he just looks at a Chitauri Energy Core. And then Karen's like, "That is an explosive device." And he's like, "Oh my god, we've been carrying a bomb?" And then he immediately figures out, okay, now we have to move the plot along and get to the Washington Monument. And it's just kind of a weird flow, where characters just kind of figure it out, and then it happens a second time when he steals Flash's car and his phone, and he's driving, and he calls Ned. And then Ned, from this 2-second FaceTime he had with Happy Hogan, figures out that there's a lot of boxes around him or something. And then Peter pieces out from the very loose description Ned gave him that they are packing up and they're leaving, and that Vulture is going to hijack the plane, which I don't know how he would figure that out. But, like, I guess it does make sense how he figured it out, but it's just, like, characters just, like, Peter's just driving, he's like, "I just have to stop him." and then as he's driving, he basically figures out the plot, which is kind of weird. It's a weird flow to go with, and I guess you could say it's bad writing, but it doesn't really bother me. It doesn't take away from it. The movie has a very fun narrative. The music is very well done. The score is great, by Michael Giacchino, I believe. It's one of my favorite MCU scores. I know I usually say that, but it really is one of my favorite MCU scores. And I will say, I saw this movie at a drive-in in 2017, and it was one of my most fun and exciting movie experiences I've had in years since then. And it was a wonderful movie to watch. It's a very fun, funny movie, and I think it's still definitely in my top 10 MCU films. Tom Holland is a fantastic actor. I love him. So I'd say I like it more than the two Andrew Garfield films and the first first two Tobey Maguire films, but I think I like it a little bit less than Spider-Man 3 and definitely less than Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. But Tom Holland is still my favorite Peter Parker variant, unless you're not counting Peter B. Parker because he's like an adult. So I guess Kid Peter Parker, Tom Holland is my favorite Kid Peter Parker. But yeah, just a fantastic film. I still love it. There are some weird problems, but they don't take away from the film, and they're just kind of nitpicks if you actually think more about it. And you're like, that kind of falls apart. But it's just kind of movie logic, and you can let it go, because the movie is just such a fun time. And I adore this movie. I love it so much. I can't wait to see Spider-Man Far From Home, hopefully this weekend. Don't spoil it for me, please, in the comments. But yeah, that's pretty much it on my Far From Home, Spider-Man Far From Home re-review series. Ending it off with Spider-Man Homecoming here. So you guys let me know, what are your thoughts on Spider-Man Homecoming? Is it your favorite Spider-Man film? What do you love about it? What do you not like about it? Whatever your thoughts are in the comments, just please let me know them all. And I hope you guys have a great day. Take care.